Linux, and then we proceeded to go through the process of setting up a Linux distribution on our machines as a virtual machine. And we concluded by looking at the Linux file system and some of the core differences between Linux and Windows. So today we are going to go into the command line, which is basically one of the ways through which you can interact with the underlying Linux system. And for those that maybe don't know me, my name is Nemuel, and I'm a software engineer and security researcher, and I'm also a technical instructor with that many students online. If you'd like to learn more about me or maybe get in touch, feel free to check out these links. They'll be present in the slides when I share them with you after the session. So I hope this one does not cover the title. Let me just adjust it. Okay, so now that you want to look at the command line, before that, I would like us to understand the different types of UIs, or what we call user interfaces. So a user interface is basically a way for a user, a computer user like you and me, to interact with either a software application, like the various social media apps that we have, or a digital device. So there is various ways through which you can interact with software applications or digital devices. And some of the major ones include graphical user interface, which involves the use of graphical elements, things like icons, fancy buttons, uh, checkboxes, radio buttons, input fields. Another form by which we can interact with a software application or digital device is via a menu-driven interface. So this is whereby you're presented with a list of options from which you can select one or more. And then maybe by selecting those options, you're able to perform a certain task, or you are taken to another menu again where you'll be required to, to maybe select another out of another set of menu items. And finally, we have the command line interface, which is what you are going to be looking at. And in this case, in the case of a command line interface, we are basically presented with a screen that prompts us to provide text. And based on the text that we provide, we are able to perform a certain task on the computer or on the digital device, or even get back some information that we want. Now, these are not the only ways by which you can interact with an app or a digital device, especially with the advancement in AI. With the adoption of AI, we have others, things like voice user interface. Nowadays, it's possible for you to communicate, or rather to control or interact with an application or even digital device simply using your voice. And even there is a gesture user interface, whereby you probably put on some specific sensors in your body joints, and then by moving, you're able to interact with or control a digital device or some component inside a software application. So now that we have all these different ways of interacting with a software application or digital device, why should we bother ourselves to learn about the command line? I mean, some of us are probably have probably worked with Windows before, and on Windows you basically interact with uh, nice UIs. There is a lot of buttons. You right click, you select this option. So why should we leave that, which is very easy to use, and come to the command line where we have to actually type in the commands so that we can achieve a certain task? So here are some of the benefits that we get when we use the command line instead of the other ways of interacting with an app or digital device. One of them is efficiency. So with the command line, you're able to accomplish more in fewer steps. And an example that I'm gonna give you for that, A to a folder B. So if you are on a Windows computer, that would typically involve first selecting the files that you want to move, and then right-clicking, selecting copy, and then heading over to directory B, right-clicking, and then selecting paste. Now, if you are doing that from the command line, all you'll have to do is type a single command on one line, and you'll have been able to move all those files in one go. So you just type a single command on a single line, hit enter, and your files are copied or moved to the new directory. Another benefit that we get from the command line is more flexibility and control. So an example for this is, think about having hundreds of files in one directory, and maybe all these files have different file extensions. So maybe it's documents that people are uploading to a server that you are managing. So some people have uploaded PDF documents, others have uploaded TXT files, others have uploaded documents, .docx files from Microsoft Word, and you probably want just the PDF files. So if you are doing that from a graphical user interface, the only option you have is to probably manually go through those files, selecting those that end in a .pdf extension. But if you are doing it from the command line, we have something known as wildcards, which basically allow us to use what you call regular expressions to filter out the output that we get from the command line. So for instance, if we want to, let me just type it out. If we are in a certain directory, let this load. If we are, let me head over to my desktop. If this is the directory that contains all those hundreds of files, and we only want to see the PDF files, we can simply do ls, which is used for listing the contents of a directory. Again, we will cover this in the upcoming slides. And then we are going to filter and specify that we want all files. So this asterisk here is what we call a wildcard character. And when we use it in such a command, it basically means we can have zero, I think one or more characters before this extension. So once we hit enter, we will take the result of listing all the files in the directory and then filter all the files or only the files that have a .pdf extension. So you cannot do this in the graphical user interface. It will be much harder. But from the command line, by just typing this out, you will get only the files that have a PDF extension. Another benefit we get from the command line is that you're able to easily do what we call automation, and that is done through something we call bash scripting. Now, do not worry about that. We will cover it, I think, tomorrow from the curriculum. And an example for this is think of yourself as a systems administrator, and you're managing sensitive information. Now, computers or devices are prone to damage. They can just, get to a point where they don't want to work, or you can get malware on your systems, which might encrypt your files. That is ransomware. And so one of the good practices is to frequently back up your data. So you might probably be required to back up your files maybe at midnight every day. And if you do not have knowledge of the command line, you'll probably end up doing it manually. So whenever it gets to midnight, you probably get up and then you start to manually copy the files and transfer them to your backup location. And then, of course, these files will be constantly changing every day. And so that will be a lot of work. But with something like the command line, what you can do is chain together different commands and put them in one file, which is what we call a bash script, and then use something called cron tabs, which is a way for us to tell the computer to execute a certain command or run a certain file at a specific time, maybe every day, every week, or every month. So with the command line, you are able to put all the commands that you want executed maybe every day in one file called a bash script, and then we just leave it at that. So we will not have to worry about manually doing the backing up of the files. Another benefit is remote management. So for instance, you want to deploy your own website or application to the outside world. And to do that, you'll probably need to buy some server, what you call a VPS, which is short for a virtual private server, which is basically a server which is, in some random location in the world, but that you're able to access from your machine and do whatever you want with it. So in such cases, it will be it's very rare for you to have access to the graphical user interface of that machine. It is possible. There is something called RDP, short for Remote Desktop Protocol. And it is basically a protocol that allows us to connect two machines and have access to the graphical user interface of the other machine. However, in the case of things like virtual private servers and actually a lot of cloud work that you might do, the only thing you'll have access to is the terminal. And so with an understanding of the command line, you'll then be able to connect to your server, which is in some random location, and actually do whatever you want, be it setting up your website or application and deploying it. And finally, there is the career aspect. By understanding the command line, you open yourself up to a lot of various career opportunities whose skill set or whose list of required skills includes an understanding of the Linux command line. An example is the system administrator roles, which is where you'll actually do a lot of automation. We also have DevOps, we have software development, cybersecurity, of course, and even data analysis and various other careers in tech. Now that we understand why it is good for us to have an understanding of the command line besides the normal graphical user interface, I would like us to look at some of the foundations of the command line. That is before we actually get to the commands. So whenever you go and get a new product, and by new product, I'm talking about things like a new phone, a new laptop, or even if you buy medicine or anything that you buy, when you take apart the packaging that your product has come in, more often than not, you'll find a sheet of paper that has been folded multiple times, and people rarely even take time to take it out. But if you take time and look at it, that is what we call the user manual, and it will usually contain a brief description of the product and a lot of instructions on how to use it or how not to use it, etc. So in the case of the Linux command line, the commands that we execute that you are going to be using, they are actually files. If you were here yesterday, you can remember that I mentioned that everything on Linux is a file. So all these commands that we are going to be learning, they are basically executable files, or what we call binaries, that are located somewhere within our system. So these binaries, when we get them in the system, they are usually prepackaged with the Linux equivalent of the user manual. So here we call it the documentation or the manual pages for that particular command. And so for all the commands that we are going to be learning and that you are going to be learning on your own in future, if you do not know how to use it or you want to get familiar with it, you can simply check out its documentation or what we call the manual pages. And the way to do that is simply type in man, short for manual, followed by the name of the command. Okay. So by the way, to open the command line on Linux, it is called the terminal. If you are on Windows, even Windows has a command line, by the way. And on Windows, it is called CMD, which is short for command prompt. Now that we are on Linux, I'm going to open the terminal. It's actually already open. I'm going to clear it. So if you have a lot of text on your screen and you want to clear it out, a command for that is just clear. This is something we are going to be using a lot. So you've already learned your first terminal command. So let us take any command. Let me just move to the next slide. Let us take in just a random command like pwd. As you can see here, it prints the current working directory. So let us use the man command to try and see if we can get its manual pages or a list of instructions on what it does and how we are supposed to use it. So I'm going to type in man, short for manual again, followed by the name of the command whose usage we want to know more about, and I'm going to press enter. Now, as you can see, once I hit enter, we get a new nice screen or a new presentation here on our command line, and it contains the name. So we have the command pwd, and it has a brief description. It prints the name of the current or working directory. And then we have something called the synopsis, which is basically a template for how we are supposed to use the command. And then we have a description. So print the full file name of the current working directory. And then we have other options that we can, or other parameters that we can pass to the command to customize it. We even get information on the person that wrote that command. As I told you earlier, it is just a binary and executable. So as you can see, the pwd command was written by a guy called Zim Mehring. We also have other things like how to report bugs, the copyright, and then there's also some more information if you'd like to learn more about the command and related ones. So down here we have the instructions. Press H for help. If you want, that is help will basically give us this subsection. And if you want to quit this screen, we just press Q, which is short for quit, and we are back to the command line. So it's very important to understand this because there's a lot of commands. In fact, in this masterclass, we will not be able to cover all of them, of course. And so as you go about learning on your own, or even when you get to working and you encounter a new command, it will help for you to just type in man followed by the name of the command, and you'll be able to get a very nice documentation on how to use the command. Another thing that you need to understand is what we call switches and command line arguments. So command line arguments pieces of information required to complete the intended task of a particular command. And before we actually look at this example, I'm just going to use an English statement. So say, for instance, someone just comes at you and tells you go. Go tells you go. Once they tell you that, you'll probably be confused because they have not told you where you're supposed to go, when you are supposed to go, and why you're supposed to go. So the word go on its own might be ambiguous or might not mean much to you until and unless that person adds other details so that you're able to actually act upon it. So in the same manner, when we are using the terminal commands, some of them require that you provide some more details or some more pieces of information that direct it on how to complete its intended task. So onto this example that I have here, we have the CP command. CP is short for copy, and we shall look at it again in a further slide. And for us to be able to copy files, the computer needs to know what file or files we want to copy, and it needs to know the destination directory where we want to copy those files. So we start with the command. This is the command itself. And then these other things that we have added here, file1.txt and the destination directory, these are what we call the command line arguments, okay? Because they are required by the CP command, in this case, in order for it to complete the intended task. Another thing that we will encounter is what we call switches. Now, switches, unlike command line arguments, are additional modifiers or options that we can add or choose not to either change its behavior or provide additional functionality. Sometimes we use them to customize how the command goes about its intended task. I have an example right here where we have the ls command. Ls is short for list. So if you want to see the list of files in a particular directory, we simply type in ls and hit enter. So back to the command line, we are in the desktop right here. So I'm going to type in ls. And by the way, I hope you can remember some of the core differences between Linux and Windows. While Windows is case insensitive, Linux is case sensitive, and that does not just apply to the names of files and directories. That also applies to the commands. So for instance, up here we did man in small letters, followed by the pwd command. If I choose to start with a capital M, man, and then pwd, we will get an error, and it says command man not found. Okay, and then it gives us some suggestions. And as you can see, the first suggestion is man, which starts with a small m. So all the commands are actually in small letters on Linux. Okay, so back to switches, we're talking about the ls command. So let me type it right here to list the files that we have on our desktop. And we get a listing of files, australia.jpg, intro to Linux, which is the presentation for today, the Kali Linux archive that we downloaded yesterday, the extracted file, the first presentation for yesterday, and some other file that we shall use later on. Now, if we want to customize it, suppose we are doing an investigation after a hack and we suspect that the hackers left some malicious software on their machine. Now, one of the tricks the attackers might have decided to use is to hide that program. Even if you're from Windows, then you're probably familiar with the idea of hidden files. Hidden files are files that are, yes, they exist on the disk, but when you try to view them on File Explorer, you will not see them. Now on Windows, to make a file hidden, you simply select the file from the Files Explorer, and then I think you change some options at the top of that window. I think it's some checkbox that you uncheck or something like that. But on Linux, to hide a file, all you need to do is to prepend the name of the file with a single dot, that character. So if you want to hide, let me go back to my desktop. So if you want to hide this file, all we simply need to do is to prepend it with a dot character. So let me just create a new file. Do not worry about the command that I used to create this new file, the touch command, because we will look more into it in further slides. So let me just create a new file. And as you can see, we get a new file right here. Now, if I want this file to disappear from the interface, but not from the disk, I just want it to be hidden, I just rename it and I prepend it. To prepend means, you add something to the beginning of the name, and I'm going to have a dot. Now, if I hit enter, okay, we are on the desktop, so that's not going to change. But if we view it in the Files Explorer, you can see we cannot see it right here. It is not present. But if we come to the options here, we have this show hidden files, and it appears. So it has the dot character. So let me just remove that file. So, okay, we still have it. I don't know if, have I removed it? Let me go back. Okay, let me just create it again. There's something I'd like to show us. So let me just create it again. And then I'm going to rename it. And I'm going to pretend to prepend it with the dot character to make it hidden. So I told a file with that name already exists. Okay, so the file already exists. So let me just remove this. So if we come right here and do a listing, we've been told the file already exists, the test file. But if we do a listing, we cannot see it. And the reason for that is obvious. It is a hidden file. Now, the ls command, if we do man, again, for the manual pages of the ls command, we get a short description. It allows us to list directory contents. And if we move further down, one of the things that we can provide to it is the -a or --all switch, which will instruct it to not ignore entries starting with a dot character. So if we type in ls space followed by a -a or --all, then we will be able to see all the files, including those that are hidden. So I hope this gives you an understanding of where switches come in. So while the ls command just on its own without adding anything else will list the directory contents, if we add the a switch or the all switch, we will be able to customize it or rather extend its functionality so that it will list even the files that are hidden or the files that start with a dot character. So I'm going to close that and I'm going to do ls space -a. And now you can compare the output of this and the output of this. So as you can see, I actually have another hidden file on my desktop, which is a command and control server, which is a Python script. I actually had forgotten about it. And then we have our test file, which we've just created right now. So back to our slides. So the switches basically allow us to either change the behavior of the command or provide additional functionality. So for instance, in the command that we've just looked at, using the A switch extends the ls command to list even the hidden files. Now we have two ways of providing what you call the switches to command line or to terminal commands. We can use the short form, which is a single letter, or the first letter of the switch, or we can use the long form, which is the entire word. So if you are, lazy or you just want to get things done quickly, you might want to just use a single letter. And in that case, you use a single hyphen. But in the case where you want to use the full name, then you prepend it with two hyphens. So back here, we can do ls-a. Here we've used the short form. So we've used a single letter and a single hyphen. But if we want to use the full form or the long form of the switch, we use two hyphens followed by the switch, which is all, and it gives us the same output. So that is it, guys, about the command line foundations. There is another one which we call the pipe operator, but we shall look at that in the next slide. So before we actually get to start looking at the commands, I'd like to ask if there's any questions so far, or if there's anything that I have covered in the previous 2 or 3 slides that you've not understood. Are there any questions or any clarifications that anyone might want from what I have just covered for the past few minutes? If you have a question, you can just raise up your hand. Okay, Stella wants me to explain switches again. Okay, have I closed my, let me just open that. So switches, Stella, there are additional modifiers or options that can be added to a command. So let me go back to my terminal. The ls command, for instance, allows us to view the contents of the directory that we are in. But suppose we want to extend its functionality to, for example, include hidden files. We need a way to tell it to do that. Don't just list the files that you can see. Look even for the files that are hidden, the files whose names start with a dot character. To do that, we use what we call switches, which are the modifiers, and the syntax for that is either a single hyphen, if we are using the short form, or a single letter, or two hyphens if we are using the long form or the full word. So I don't know if that explains it. Does it? You can just show me with a thumbs up. Okay. I can see something else in the comments. If you're okay, pipe, where can I learn more about RDP? I'll just tell you Google. Google is your best friend. Just open Google and type in RDP. Yeah, open the first link and you'll have everything you want to know about the remote desktop protocol. If you're on Windows, download and install Git. Okay, thank you, but please let us not digress. Let us just focus on the command line basics. We can probably touch on that later on. If you're on Windows, you can also use Windows PowerShell. That is right. If you're unable to set up Linux from yesterday's session, feel free to type PowerShell on your Windows start menu, and you'll be able to actually execute a lot of these commands. PowerShell I believe, an attempt by Windows to, just as we talked about the Windows subsystem for Linux, I think it's an attempt by Windows to create that Linux experience for the users that are on Windows. Okay, so if we are all okay, if you're okay, you can just show me with a thumbs up so that I can move on. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So now onto the actual commands. So the first type of, so we have divided these commands into different categories. So different groups of commands are responsible for different categories of actions. So if we, for instance, want to navigate around the file system, if you were here yesterday, we looked at the Linux file system. We are going to start by now looking at commands that allow us to know where we are in the file system and that allow us to move around the file system. So if you're, for example, in some city and you are lost, one of the things that you can do is open your phone and go to Google Maps, and it will tell you, it will give you your coordinates and probably tell you where you are, even, by the name of that location. So in the same manner, when we are on the terminal and we want to know where we are, we use the pwd command, which is short for print working directory. So I'm going to type in pwd, and as you can see, it gives us the path to where we are in the file system. So in this case, we are in the home directory of username.xt, which is my username, and desktop. If we, for instance, move one directory up, or if we move to the top of the directory structure and type in pwd, you can see we get back the root or the sign that denotes the root of the directory structure, or the top of the directory structure. So let me go back to home. Let me just do cd home, my username, and desktop. Okay, so that is the pwd command. So if you want to know where you are, just type in pwd again in all small letters, and you know where you are in the system. The second command is the ls command, which you're probably already familiar with by now. And what it does is it lists the contents of the current directory. So just typing in ls will give you a listing of the files in your directory, and that's just about it. Again, if you want to customize it to, for instance, see the hidden files, or if you want to actually see more details about these files, like for instance, when they were created and the permissions that they have, you can use the L switch. L is short for long, so it will give us more details about the files. So as you can see, it gives us more details. So for instance, australia.jpg, you can see it was created today, just about an hour before the session. The PDF, the slides for yesterday were created on this date and at this time, and on and on. So it's, something like this can help you if you're, for instance, doing some forensics. Maybe you've gotten access to this computer and you want to know the last time a file was modified. So for that, you can just type in ls, and then you use the L switch, which will give you more details such as the username, who created it. You can even see the permissions and the date it was created and the last time it was modified. And by the way, right here, you can see this one starts with a letter D and the others start with a hyphen. If you were here yesterday, you understand these R, W, and X are basically permissions. We will look at that in, I think, tomorrow. But the first part, this hyphen, if it starts with a hyphen, then that means that that directory content is a file. And if it starts with a D, then that directory content is a directory. If we go to the desktop, you can see that all this one is a file, it's a file, it's a file, it's a file, it's a file, but this one is a directory. And for that reason, all of these start with a hyphen, and this one starts with a D, which is short for directory. The next command is cd. Cd is short for change directory, and it allows us to switch between the different directories or just navigate around the file system. So I think you've already actually seen me use it. So I am in the desktop directory. Suppose I want to move into the, so let me do a listing again. So we have another directory right here, which is called Kali Linux. If I want to navigate into it, then I can just type in cd, short for change directory, followed by the name. Again, case sensitive. These are common mistakes that beginners make. You probably have caps lock turned on, and so you type in Kali Linux. If you hit enter, it tells you no such file or directory. So cd Kali Linux. Hit enter. By the way, if you're typing in a long name and you want to save on time, you can just type in tab. So if I type in KAL and I hit tab, it will automatically complete the name or command for me. So let me go back. I've typed in KAL and then I've pressed tab. It will automatically go through the list of available options, in this case, the available files in this directory, and look for one that matches these first three characters. And if it's just one file, then it will just automatically complete it for me. If I hit enter, you can see it updates the path right here. So now we are in the desktop and in the Kali Linux directory. So we can confirm that by typing in pwd, print working directory, and we get the path. So we are in the home directory of the user namesxt. We are in his desktop and in the Kali Linux directory. The cd command is also interesting in such that we can opt to not provide anything. So if we do not provide anything, we just type in the cd command and hit enter. It takes us back to the home directory of the current user. So you can actually type in the full path, home, then the username, and hit enter. It will take you back to the home directory, or you can just type it as is, and it will take you back to the home directory of the current user. You can also type in cd followed by this, what you call the tilde, and it will do the same. You'll end up in the home. Let me go back to the desktop and then type in cd first. And as you can see, it takes us to the home directory. Let me go back to the desktop and type cd with the tilde. And again, it takes us back to the desktop. So the tilde is a special character on the command line that denotes the home directory. So if, for instance, you want to navigate to, let me go back to the top of the directory structure and say I want to go to my home directory, and inside the desktop folder of my home directory, rather than type in home / namesxt / desktop, I can just represent the home directory with a tilde and then desktop. And if I hit enter, you can see I am automatically taken to the home directory and the desktop folder within the home directory. So I hope that is clear. The next set of commands that I want us to look at is finding stuff. So you've opened the command line, your computer has a lot of files, and now you want to probably locate a certain file. So one of the commands that we have for that is the locate command. So by now you can probably see how easy it is. Most of these commands are just English words that directly point to what they do. If you hear the name of the command, you can even guess what it does. So the locate command allows us to search for files and directories using a pre-built database. So the operating system that you are using, I believe even Windows, maintains what you call an index or a database of all the files and directories that are there. So if we create a new file or directory every few hours, that central database gets updated to include the newly created files and directories. We have the same thing on Linux, and I think that database is updated once every 24 hours. So to look for a file, one of the ways that you can do that is just do locate. So let's say, for instance, I want to locate a file called Firefox, which is the browser. So I can type that in and hit enter. And as you can see, I get every instance or every file on the on my system here, which has the word Firefox in it. As you can see, it's a lot of files, and I'm going to terminate that command. Another thing, if you're currently executing a command and you want to stop it, maybe you do not want to wait for it to finish its execution, you just type in Control C and you'll terminate. So let me do that again. If I press Control C, as you can see, it stops and I go back to the prompt. So by typing in locate followed by the name of the file or directory that you look for, that you want to find, it will simply go through that central database and it will give us every single instance of that file in the entire system. Okay. And again, I've said that database is updated once every 24 hours. So that means if I create a new file right now, like for instance, the file that I created, for instance, I've created this file just, I think, about an hour or two ago. If I try to find it using locate.jpg and hit enter, I'll probably not find it. And the reason for that is, note, the database is updated once every 24 hours. So if we want this file to be forcefully added to the database, we can just type in update db, and what this will do is that it will go through the file system again, and if it spots any new files or directories that have been created within that time frame from the last time the database was updated, those new files and directories will be added to the database. So I'm not going to do that because, of course, the system is big and such a command will take a lot of time and probably a lot of resources. So I'm going to avoid that, but now you know how to go about it. The other command for finding stuff is the where is command. So the where is command allows us to look for a location of a binary file. So while the locate command allows us to look for anything, it could be a text file, an image, a document, the where is command allows us to look for binary files specifically, or the equivalent of executable files on Windows. So I'm going to get back to my terminal and I'm going to type in where is, and I'm going to look for Firefox. So now we are going to look for the binaries of our web browser, which is the Firefox web browser, and I'm going to hit enter. And as you can see, it gives me the result quite fast. So you can see the binary for our browser is located in user bin Firefox directory. And we also have another one in the user lib Firefox directory. So this is the actual path to that file. So if we go to the user bin directory and we do a listing of files, we will find an executable file there, which is called Firefox. If we go to this directory, we'll also find it. This one, okay, it provides actually more information. So it provides us with the path to the binary, and then it provides us with a path to probably some dependencies for that binary, or dependencies are other files that the binary requires in order to do its, in order for it to work as intended. It also gives us the path to to the configuration files. If you are here yesterday, we probably touched on the etc directory. This is where we have configuration files. We also get a path to its manual pages. So you can see even Firefox has its own manual. So that means I think we can do man Firefox. Yeah. So as you can see, we are able to do man. We are able to execute the Firefox command from the command line. It's a free and open source web browser from Mozilla, the organization. We get a description and even some other options that you can provide. I'm going to quit. And I hope by now you are familiar with the where is command. So this one is specifically for binaries or the equivalent of executables on Windows systems. So the other one is the find command. So probably if you have some experience with locate and where is, you probably frustrated at some point when you want to customize your search for a particular file or files, when you want to customize that search even further. So the find command is another command that allows us to look for and find files and directories on our system, but it is more flexible and powerful than the other commands. How flexible? Let's just go to the terminal and look for its manual pages. So I'm going to do man followed by find. And as you can see, the find command is used to search for files in a directory hierarchy. As you can see, it has a lot of switches. So we have a lot of options to customize it. If you go downwards, if you are using find in an environment where security is important, blah, blah, blah. The option, the H, L, and P options control the treatment of symbolic. So as you can see, it has a lot of details. So able to use it on things you call symbolic links. By the way, symbolic links are just the Linux way of saying shortcuts. So if you are from Windows, then you're probably familiar with file shortcuts. So on Linux, the name we use for file shortcuts are symbolic links. So we have a lot of options for it. But let me show you the basic usage. So just type in find, and then using the name switch, we are able to specify the name that we are looking for. So I'm just going to look for Australia. I'm just going to use the file that you have on the desktop, the name Australia, and I'm going to hit enter. And just another thing we can specify is the directory where we want to look for our file. So you can type in find. So let me just try to put it as an English statement. So find in this directory, so home, this desktop, find within the desktop a file by the name Australia. I don't know why we can't find it. Let's try to provide the type file. Okay, I don't know why we can't find it. I guess it also relies on the central database, like the locate command that you had looked at earlier. So I don't know if we can try typing in something else like Linux or Kali to see if it can appear. I don't know why it's not appearing, but this is basically the syntax for it. So it allows you to really customize your search for files. So you type in find and then the path. This is optional, by the way, you don't have to include it. If you don't include it, it will go through the entire file system and it will look for, you can specify the type of file that you are looking for. Here you can provide either the letter F or the letter D. So F is short for file and D is short for directory, and then the name that you want to search for. So using the name switch and then the name of the file that you want to look for. So I hope that is clear. And another thing that I would like us to look at, a very interesting one, is the grep command. So grep is not really necessary, is not really limited to looking for files or directories. It is just a filter that you can use to search for keywords in a particular data set or in a particular, text. So for instance, let's say we are in a file or in a directory with a lot of files. I'm just going to use the desktop for simplicity's sake. Let's say, rather than how many files? Rather than these 6 files, we have like several thousand or several hundred files, and we want to look for a file with a specific name. So one of the ways is to actually just do ls and then go through all the results one by one, looking for that name that we want. And another option now is to use the grep command. So we simply do ls, and then we use something, the pipe operator that I'm going to explain, and we pass it to the grep command. So grep followed by what we are looking for you. So you type in grep space followed by what you're looking for. So let's say, for instance, I want to just get a list out of the listing of files in the current directory. I only want those files that have the word Kali in them. So as you can see, the only thing we expect here is this one, which is the directory, and this one. So if I hit enter, as you can see, we get only those 2 files. So if we had thousands or hundreds of files, we'd only get the data that you want. Now back to the pipe character. For us to understand it, I'm going to use an analogy. Think of a factory or an industry. In a factory, we have multiple production lines. So if you are manufacturing, I don't know, if you're manufacturing a vehicle, for instance, you will have the first production line where you probably give, the robotic hands some raw materials, and then it joins them to maybe create a particular component of the vehicle. And then the result of that production line is passed on to the second production line, where we probably have the board of the vehicle being added. And then once we move from there, the result that you get from there gets moved to the third production line, where we probably add the tires, and then we probably move to the final production line where the vehicle gets painted or something like that. So in the same manner, on the command line, we are able to chain different commands such that the output of one command is passed on to another command as its input. So in the factory example or analogy, when we are moving the product or the finished product from production line 1 to production line 2, we use the conveyor belts, right? It is the conveyor belt that moves these products between the different production lines. So the equivalent of a conveyor belt in the Linux terminal is the pipe character. So on your keyboard, I think you should find it. If you look on your keyboard, you'll find this character. So by using it between two commands, what will happen is the first command will be executed, but it will not stop at that. So what will happen is the output of this command will then be passed over to the next command for further processing or whatever we want to do with it. So in this case, the output of ls, which is all these files, get passed on to the grep command. And the grep command, what it basically does in this case is it will go through all the results that you've gotten here and look only for those that have the word curly in them and then display them to us. So that is it for the grep command. Again, it is, it goes beyond that. For instance, if we have a file, I have a file here called long file, which I just created for illustration. So let me just view its contents. So to view the contents of a file, by the way, though we shall look at this command, you can just type in cat. So cat is short for concatenate. We look at what that means in the next slide. But if you want to just see the contents of a file, you just type in cat followed by the name, cat long file, hit enter. And as you can see, I just put in a lot of things. So just assume this file contains thousands of lines. So for instance, if you are in cybersecurity and you are doing some forensics, so maybe you are going through the log files and they contain a lot of data, and you just want to see, the connections that we got from a particular IP address. So using the grep command, we are able to filter all the contents of that file for a particular value. So in this case, I've just included this line. So the secret is secret 123. So maybe someone has told us within this file, you'll find a particular value, which is really important. But then the file is too big and we don't want to go through all of it manually. So what we can do is cut or display its contents, long file, and then again, pass the output of this command onto the grep command and look for the word secret. I'm going to hit enter. And as you can see, rather than get all this unnecessary gibberish, we get back the actual line that we want. The secret is secret 123, and it actually highlights the word in red. So that is the basics of the grep command. It is actually more advanced. We are able to use it with things called regex, which is short for regular expressions. Feel free to look that up online again, because we'll not be covering it in this training. And the next set of commands is, just text editing. Now, or if you are from Windows and you want to work with a document or even create a simple text file, a simple way for you to do that is to just open Notepad or open Microsoft Word, and you'll be ready to go. You'll just type in your work, click somewhere, save, or press Control S, and you are good. But suppose you have access to the server, which talked about in a few slides back, where the only way for you to interact with the server is through the command line. Maybe you do not have access to the graphical user interface, and you probably want to create a new file. How do you do that? Well, there's actually a lot of commands for us to do that. Nano is just one of them, and the one that we shall be looking at. There's others like vim. So let me type in that here. I'm not going to open it because I'm not really good at it, and it can be hectic to get out of vim. So I'm just going to do man, short for manual, hit enter. And as you can see, it is short for V improved. So before Vim, we had another one called V, and then it was improved upon, and we got Vim. And as you can see, it is a programmer's text editor. So the reason it is, liked or maybe popular is because of the various shortcuts and all the cool things it allows us to do with just keyboard shortcuts. So it's a text editor that's upwards compatible to Vim. It can be used to edit all kinds of plain text, and it is especially useful for editing programs. So there's a lot of enhancements, etc., etc. I'm going to quit. So that is another command or program that we can use in the command line to handle text files. However, the one that I've listed here and that is actually good for someone who is starting out is called Nano, and it's actually what I personally use like all the time. And to use it, you just type in Nano followed by the name of the file. So let's say let me just call it my file, my file. And if I hit enter, as you can see, it takes me to another window, which is just like a text editing window. And within this window, I can type in anything that I want. So if it's a letter, if it's notes that I want to take, I can do all that. And once I am done, if you look at the bottom of this window, we have some helpful options. If we want to get help, you just press control. So these I don't know what's the name? I can't remember the name of this character. Um, this character represents the control button on your keyboard. So if you want to get help, just press control and G. If you want to write out or to just save our contents, you type in control O and on and on. Another one worth noting is if you want to exit, you just type in control X. So in my case, let's say we want to save this file. So I'm going to do control S. That is pretty much the standard for saving anything. So I'm going to do control S. And as you can see here, it tells us wrote 9 lines. That's the number of lines that we have here. And now we can simply exit by pressing Control X. And if we do a listing, you can see we have a new file called my file. And you can view its contents by typing in cat my file. And as you can see, we have all the things that you've typed in it. So another thing worth noting is Nano can work with both a file that already exists or a file that does not exist. So if we type in Nano my file right now, because my file already exists, it will just open this file that already exists, as you can see right here. But if the file does not exist, if you use some, let's say, Nemuel's notes, and we hit enter, this file does not exist. And so Nano will automatically create that file for us and present us with this window where we can do our editing work. So I hope that is clear on text editing. And before I move on to the next set of commands, I think I can give you a chance to ask any questions or seek clarification. So I can see already have a hand lifted up. So you can ask your question, Rachel.
Hi, my name is Rachel. So, asking the difference between Vim, V, Emacs, and Nano. Yeah.
Hmm? Okay, nice question. So all of those, Vim, Emacs, and Nano, all of them are different programs or command line tools that we can use to edit text files. I don't know if I have Emacs. Okay, I don't know. Let me see if I have it. Oh, I don't have Emacs, but basically all those programs that you have mentioned, they are text file editing programs. And the difference between them is, like the difference between Firefox, the Firefox web browser, and the Google Chrome web browser, Opera Mini web browser, Tor browser. So all of them do more or less the same thing, but they are different in terms of implementation, the features, and how we go about editing files. So I hope that answers your question. So they all do the same thing, but they're just the implementation is different. I hope that is clear. Rachel, you can confirm.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a command to install them, like the Emacs and the Vim?
Yes, we will look
Is
at
there a specific command?
yeah.
Uh-huh.
For now, I can just point you to Google. Just type in how to install Emacs on Linux, for instance, and you'll get your command here. So if you are on Red Hat, for instance, DNF install Emacs. If you are on Debian, apt-get install Emacs. The reason I'm pointing you to Google for now is because we will actually cover all that tomorrow, I believe, where we will talk about managing software packages and applications from the command line. So just for your sake, to install any package or application via the command line, you just type in apt-get install, install, followed by the name. So for instance, Emacs. And as you can see right here, I'm sure it has given us a suggestion for that. As you can see, when I typed Emacs and the system noticed I do not have it installed, it gave me a list of commands that I can use to install it. So that is how you install it. You can just type in apt-get install Emacs. If a Nano comes by default with your Linux distribution, things like Vim, I think, I'm not sure if they come by default with the Linux distribution, but of course, if you don't have a Nano, you can just type in operations. So we have a group of commands that allow us to do various things pertaining to files and directories. And one of them is to create a new empty directory. So we are on our desktop. I'm going to clear the screen. Again, if anyone has already forgotten, if you want to clear your terminal window, just type in clear and all the text before it will be removed. And you go back to the top. So when we want to create a new directory, say for instance, let me do an ls. Say for instance, I don't want these PDF files, scattered on my desktop. Say for instance, I want to move them to a specific directory, which I can then maybe archive or compress and then share it with you guys. So the first step for that will be to create a new directory. And the command for that is mkdir, which is short for make directory. So I'm going to type that one, mkdir, followed by the name of the directory. So I can call that maybe slides. And let me just call it intro to Linux, and I can hit enter. And if we do a listing, we can now see that we have a new directory, which is called intro to Linux. So that is basically how we create a new directory. That's straightforward. Just type in mkdir, or short for make mkdir, sorry, short for make directory, followed by the name of the directory that we want to create. Now, if we want to delete an empty directory, again, note empty directory. So if you want to delete an empty directory, the command for that is just rmdir, again, short for remove directory, followed by intro to Linux. So tab to autocomplete, hit enter, and if we do a file listing, we cannot find it. So here it was there because we just created it. Now we've deleted it and it is not there. So those are the two commands for creating and deleting a directory. Now, if we want to create an empty file, the command for that is touch. So if you just type in touch followed by the name of the file that if you just want to create an empty file, so just type in touch followed by the name of the file. Say for instance, random file name. Hit enter, and if we do ls, we can now see we have a new entry right here, which is called random file name. And if we decide to display its contents, you can see it's an empty file. So using the touch command followed by the name of a file, you get to create it, and it's empty. So touch followed by whichever name you want, and you'll have an empty file. Now, if we want to view the type of file, the command for that is file followed by the name of the file. So if you were here yesterday, you can remember that one of the core differences that we noted between Linux and Windows is that on Linux, the file extensions do not really mean much. So on Windows, when you open a file, what the underlying system does to determine how the file will be opened or how it will be processed or handled, Windows basically looks at the file extension. That is the letters, the 3 or so letters after the dot character. So if you do an ls, so for instance, the extension for this file is .pdf, the extension for this file is .pdf, for this one is .jpg. So if we are on Windows and we double click on this file, on the file Explorer, sorry, Windows will read this and it will automatically assume that this is an image. But if we look at it right here using the file command, okay, let me just use this one first. If we type in file, we all know this is a PDF file because it is what I have open right here. So if I type in file followed by the name of the file and hit enter, as you can see, it tells us Intro to Linux part2.pdf is a PDF document, and the PDF version is version 1.4. Even if I decide to maybe try to rename it, I'm not going to risk that because we are using the file right now. If I try it on something like this, so we have the .jpg extension, and so at first glance, one will assume that this is an image, but if I type in file australia.jpg and hit enter, it is actually an empty file. So Linux does not look at the extension, it looks at the metadata of the file. So every file, including this PDF or even this compressed archive, let us, for instance, check out the type of file that we downloaded for Kali Linux. So Kali Linux, as you can see, the file that we downloaded is a 7-zip archive, which is basically a fancy name for a compressed file. And the version for that is version 0.4. So if you want to determine the type of file on Linux, you do not look at the extension. This is not like Windows. Instead, you look at you use the file command, which will use the metadata, which is located within the file, whose type you want to know, and you'll get an accurate response. The next command that we are going to look at is the rm command. Rm from rmdir is simply short for remove. And so the rm command allows us to remove or delete files or even directories. So we can even we can also delete directories using the rm command. So to use it, in rm followed by the name of the file that you want to delete. So I'm going to clear my terminal. I'm going to do a listing. So we already have some unnecessary files right here, like random file name. So let's say, for instance, I no longer need it and I want to delete it. To do that, I'm just going to type in rm followed by the name and hit enter. And if we do ls again, you can see we no longer have it. So that's just it for the rm command. You just type in rm followed by the name of the file and it will be deleted. Now, if you want to delete a directory using the rm command, now note we have the rmdir. So the rmdir I specified is only used for deleting empty directories if the directory does not contain anything. But if we try it on something like Kali Linux, which actually contains files, if we do a listing of the Kali Linux directory, you can see we have our Kali Linux virtual machine, which we created yesterday. So if we try to delete that directory using rmdir, we will get an error. It failed to remove the Kali Linux directory because it is not empty. But we can use the rm command and the directory, but then we will use some switches. Again, if you can remember some slides back, we looked at switches and command line arguments, and we said switches allow us to extend the functionality of the command or customize it to do something, something beyond the bare minimum. So in this case, what we will do is provide two switches. One is R. R is short for recursive, which means it will go inside the Kali Linux directory and look for any files and directories. And if there are directories within the Kali Linux directory, it will again keep going inside those directories and then deleting each file in order. So that is what the R switch does, recursive. And then F forces it. So by default, we are not supposed to be able to delete a directory that is not empty. But since we want to do that, and we know we want to do that, we also add the F switch, which is short for force. We want to force it to do that, and then we can hit enter. Now, I'm not interested in deleting the files for our virtual machine, so I'm going to remove that. But now you just type in RF, and then you provide the two switches, R and F, R for recursive, and F for force, followed by the name of the target directory. The other command is the CP command, which is short for copy, and it relates closely with the MV command, which is short for move. So if you want to copy a file from directory A to directory B, you just type in CP. So let us just actually look at its manual pages, man CP. So as you can see, it allows us to copy files and directories, the options, copy, and then we have, we can provide some additional options right here. But then what we need is the source, which is the file that you want to copy, and the destination. You can also provide the source and the directory where we want it moved from. So it copies source to destination or multiple sources to the target directory. So I'm going to quit that. And we're going to do that practically. So I'm going to do ls, and I'm going to create a directory for our slides. So I'm going to create a mekdir intro to Linux. And I'm going to do cp, and then you're going to provide the file that you want to copy. In this case, it is intro to Linux. I'm going to copy the slides for yesterday, and then I'm going to copy it into the intro to Linux directory. So that directory, and if I hit enter, and now we do a listing of the intro to Linux directory, you can see we have a new file right here, which is the intro to Linux part 1.pdf. Another command that closely relates to this is the move command. I believe if you have worked with Windows or any other system, you know the difference between copy and move. So copy basically creates a duplicate of the file or files or even entire directories, while move actually deletes it from its first location and creates a copy of it in the second location. So if I use the mv command instead of cp and type in intro to Linux 1.pdf and move it into the intro to Linux directory and hit enter, if we do a listing now, you can see we no longer have this file on our desktop. It has been moved. So it's no longer here, but if we do a listing of the intro to Linux directory again, it is right here. So that's just about it for the copy and move commands. Something else I'd like us to note, let me move into the intro to Linux directory. Let me clear the screen. Another use case for the move command is if we want to rename files. So if you're using the Files Explorer to rename files, you just right click, you select the file, right click, and then select rename. I think we'd actually done that. You just select the file, right click, rename, and then you'll have the option of renaming it. But if we are in the command line, we do not have a command called rename. So what we do is we just use the move command, only that rather than providing some other directory where we want to move the file, we just provide a different name within the same directory. So say, for instance, we want to rename this file into, intro to Linux day one, or maybe day one slides. So we just type in intro to Linux pdf.pdf, and then we provide our new name, say, for instance, day one slides.pdf. And if we hit enter and do a listing, we no longer have this name. We instead have day one underscore slides.pdf. No new file was created. So all that happened was the same file, intro to Linux 1.pdf, was just renamed to day one underscore slides.pdf. That's just about it for the copy and move commands. The other one is the cat command, which we've actually already used a number of times by now. Cat is short for concatenate, and concatenation, by definition, is the process of joining together, two or more things. So at its core, the cat command is meant to enable us to join together two or more files, or maybe even strings. A string is basically a sequence of characters. Maybe those who have done some programming in a language like C or for my name, that process is called concatenation. So the cat command allows us to concatenate or put together two or more files and have them as one file. The other side of it is that it allows us to view the contents of a file. So if we type in cat, let me head over to the desktop. And something else I forgot to mention, if we want to move just one directory up from where we are, so right now we are in the intro to Linux directory, and we know very well that just one step above it is the desktop. Rather than take the time typing the entire path to the desktop directory, home, username, desktop, we can just type in cd and two dots without a space between them. And if you hit enter, it will take you one step up. And if we look at where we are in the desktop. So to see the cat command in action, again, we had already done this before. We just type in cat followed by the name of the file whose contents we want to see and hit enter. And as you can see, we get the contents of the file. Now onto the concatenation part. Let's say we want to join these two files, my file and long file, and we want them to be, we want to bring the contents of these two files together and call that file or that new file maybe my new file. So just type in cat followed by the name of files. So we want to merge long file and my file. So we separate them with spaces, and then we use the greater than character, which is called the redirection character, I believe, and followed by the name of the file that you want to have as a result of combining these two. So you can say maybe third file. If you hit enter and you do a listing, you'll see we have a new file called that file. And if we view its contents, you can see we first have the contents of long file, and then we have the contents of our, what was the name of the file? My file. So we have long file included in this new file, and we have also the contents of my file. So that's basically the use of the cat command. Again, if you want to learn more about using it, just type in man followed by the name of the command, and you'll be able to see all the other options that are available. There's many of them, and we cannot exhaust them. The other two commands that are of interest are the more and less command. So suppose again we are handling a log file. A log file is basically a file that stores, or basically a log. A log is a record of events. So as we were looking at the Linux file system yesterday, one of the directories we mentioned is the var directory. The var directory, and we said that this is where we will find log files. So if I move to the var directory, and we do a listing, and we move on to log within it, and we do a listing, as you can see right here, we have a lot of log files. And if we just cut out the contents of any file, let me just do, for instance, auth.log. Okay, so as you can see, we have a lot of contents in this file, too long for us to view it all. So as you can see, even if I scroll to the very top, all this is a lot of content. Now, suppose you want to go through this content step by step, and that is where the more and less commands come in. So if rather than using the cat command followed by the name of the file, we use more followed by the name of the file, and we hit enter. As you can see, let me first clear, and then type in more followed by the name of the file and hit enter. As you can see, we do not get a lot of, as you can see, the entire contents of the file is not displayed to the console. Instead, we get just enough content or enough data from the file to fill one page of the command line. And only if we are interested can we move on to the next page. So if we are done with the first page and we want to see the next page of the content, we just press spacebar, and it takes us to the next pages. As you can see, we're able to move through the different pages. If you want to quit, you can just type in Q. If you want to, for instance, move line by line, you can just type in enter. Just look at this part right here. If I hit enter, we get a new line like that. If you want to move in entire pages, just press spacebar and you move through entire pages. So what it does is it reads the contents of the file and then breaks it down into pages. And a page in this context is just enough text to fill in, our command line window. Its counterpart, which is called the less command, just does the same thing. But interestingly, if you've been on Linux long enough, you've probably heard of the statement less is more. And that is usually meant to pass across the point that with the less command, we are able to achieve more or do more as compared to the more command. So let's try doing the same thing, viewing the contents of that file, but this time using the less command. So less auth.log. So as you can see, we are able to, to see the contents of the file in the same manner, but we have other options. So if you want to navigate page by page, again, just press spacebar, you'll be able to do that. If you want to move line by line, just press enter. And if you look down here, we get new lines like that. But we have other things that we can do. So if we, for instance, want to look for the appearance of a certain word, we can just, let me just quit that and do it again. If we want to look, the less command allows us to do some other things. things like searching for the occurrence of a particular word. So if I type in, I think it was backslash, I can't remember the exact character, but by typing in a certain character, we're able to then proceed. Yeah, I think that is it. We're able to type in, for instance, the word root. And if we hit enter, okay, input is not a pipe. I don't know what that means. So I guess I've forgotten the character to use for that, but it allows us to do some other things beyond just viewing the content. So if you want to look for a particular, the occurrence of a particular word or a particular name, we're able to do it from here. So that's the more and less commands. They allow us to view the contents of big files, but in a more convenient manner from the command line. Other two commands are head and tail. So these are opposite words. So the head command allows us to display the beginning of a file. Again, these commands right here are useful if we are dealing with big files. So if you type in head followed by the name of a file, it will by default display only the first 10 lines of the file. So if we want to see the number of lines in a file, you can just WC is short for word count, and it allows us to see the number of words in a file, the number of lines, or the number of, whatever you want. But we are not going to be covering it. But I'm just going to use it right here so that you can see the number of lines in this file. So we have 897 lines in the auth.log file. Say, for instance, I want to just see the first 10 lines. Maybe I want to see the most recent or the most, historic logs. I can just type in head followed by the name of the file. And if I hit enter, as you can see, we only get a list of logs for the past, from the first 10 lines of the file. So it just displays or gives back to us the first 10 lines of the file. If we want to see the last 10 lines of the file, we just type in tail followed by the name of the file, and you hit enter and you'll get the last 10 lines. And as you can see, these are more recent because the logs are added incrementally. They are appended to the end of the file. So if you use the head command, you'll get logs that are from way back. If you use tail, you'll get the more recent logs, which are at the bottom of the file. And the most recent one is at 9:25, which is just about 5 minutes ago. But if we want to, for instance, view 15 lines instead of the default 10 lines, we can just type in head and then a hyphen and the number of lines that we want to see. So if we do not provide that and we just pass in the file, by default, we will get 10 lines. But if we want to see, for instance, 15 lines or 50 lines, we just type in a hyphen followed by the number. And as you can see now, we get some extra lines. You can compare. These are a bit shorter, but here we have an extra 5 lines. Let me make it 50 so that you can see the significant difference. So as you can see, we get way more files because we have requested for 50 lines. And the same thing applies to the tail command. So rather than get the default 10 last lines, we can get the last 50 lines of the file. As you can see, we get a lot of output, which is 50 lines from the bottom of the file. So that is it for the file and directory operations commands. I'm going to stop a bit and allow anyone that has a question to pose it, or anyone in need of clarification to seek it. Okay, I can see a question here. Just a tip, other than typing out clear for clearing the terminal, you can alternatively use the keyboard shortcut Control L. Yeah, thanks for that, Godfrey. Is it good? Thanks for that, Jeffrey. So if you do not want to keep typing, for instance, let's do ls. If I want to clear the command line, I can just type in Control L, and as you can see, it automatically clears the terminal. So thanks for the addition, Jeffrey. Ambrose has asked, are you the one who created the auth.log file? No, I didn't create that file. If you do a listing, I have not created any file. In fact, I barely do anything in this directory. I don't touch it. So all these are simply, yesterday we defined a log file as a file that keeps a record of events that happen. So all these log files are generated by the different applications that we have on our system to just keep track of the events that have taken place. So for instance, the auth.log file that I've been using to illustrate or to demonstrate the previous commands is automatically created by the component of the operating system or the kernel that is responsible for handling authentication by different users. We have others like anydesk.trace. If you know AnyDesk is the file that allows us to connect remotely with another computer and interact with it. So as you can see, this file right here is created by the AnyDesk application. We have the dpkg.log. This one is created by the dpkg command line tool. Can.log. These are logs created by the Linux kernel. We have PostgreSQL, which are logs for the PostgreSQL database. We have RabbitMQ, Ready, OpenVPN, etc. So all these files are mostly created by the programs that we are using. What was the command that you used to list the number of lines? Let me just type in it right here, WC, and then you use the L switch followed by the file name. So if you want more details about the command, again, just go to your terminal and type in man followed by WC, and you'll be able to go through its documentation and see all the things that you can do with the WC command. Or if you don't want that, just go to Google, type in WC, and you'll be able to get, all the usage instructions. Any question? Any other question? If you have understood everything, just show me with a thumbs up. Okay, I can see Maurice has a question. Go on, Maurice.
Yeah, I'm getting a challenge of making my screen big on Ubuntu because I just downloaded it recently.
You're using it on a virtual machine?
Yes.
Why did you attend yesterday's session?
No, sir.
Okay, so if you're here yesterday, so I have my Kali Linux virtual machine open. So if you're doing it for the first time, that is the default behavior. That is it's perfectly normal for it to behave like that. If you want to fix that, are you using VirtualBox?
Yes, VirtualBox.
Yeah, so to fix it, just come to the menu up here, click on devices, and then you'll be able to, you'll have this option right here, insert guest additions CD image, and then you can just click on it, and then a new entry will be created on your desktop. So I'll click on it, let's give it some time. And as you can see, you'll get a new entry. So when you click on that, if it's your first time, it will go to the internet and download it, and then it will add it to your virtual machine. So you'll have it on your desktop. And then the next thing for you to do will be to actually open this drive that has been mounted. Let me close one of them.
Yeah.
So the next thing will be for you to open it. So as you can see right here, we have a group of files, and these files are basically meant to do the things like extending your screen to cover your whole monitor, things like that. So these files are meant for that purpose. So all you need to do, if your virtual machine is a Windows-based, is a Windows machine, a Windows virtual machine, you just run the executable. You've said you are on Ubuntu, so all you need to do is to execute this file. And to do that, you're just going to open your terminal here. And then all you need to do, and I hope I'm not losing the rest of us, these commands will make sense as we cover more of them in the upcoming slides and upcoming sessions. So once you open your terminal in this directory, you just need to execute this file. So to execute a file, just / and then type in the name of the file, Linux additions, and hit run. This program must be run with admin privileges. So I'm just going to start with sudo. It will ask for my password. And as you can see, it will tell us verifying archive integrity. This system, I already have it installed. So it tells me this system appears to have a version of the guest additions already installed. So in your case, since you don't have it, you just type in yes and let it do its work. And then once you reboot your machine, it will automatically extend to cover the entire screen. So that's how you do it. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, and then if it doesn't automatically do that, you can just come to the View tab in the menu up here, and then you'll just click on, I think, Adjust Window Size, or yeah, I think you just click on Adjust. In case it doesn't happen automatically, that is, you can just come here and click on Adjust Window Size of this one, and it will automatically extend to cover the entire screen. I hope that's it.
Yes.
Okay. Charity, question?
Yes, thank you for the session. So I have a question. How is it possible for attackers, malicious users in the system to clear the logs And if they clear, is it possible for the logs to be traced back, like in a severe another place rather than where it was?
Okay, so I'm going to start by explaining what actually happens behind the scenes when we delete a file. So when we, for instance, just type in, let me go back to the desktop. So if I, for instance, delete, so right now we have these files on the desktop. And so, of course, behind the scenes, down on my storage device, we have an entry on the drive called that file that contains the data that we have saved in this file. Now, if I type in the rm command followed by the name and hit enter, if you do a listing, it will not appear right here. And so automatically we assume that the file has been deleted and it cannot be recovered. But what actually happens behind the scenes is the operating system or the kernel within the operating system will simply mark that location within our storage drive as being available for overwriting. So once we type in the rm command followed by the name of the file, the actual bytes on the disk are not removed at all. So all that happens is that the operating system will simply note the location where we had that file, and that location will be available for overwriting. So unless we overwrite that location on the disk, if an experienced investigator gets a hold of that disk and uses some forensic tools that reads the disk byte by byte or bit by bit, they'll actually be able to recover that file. So for you to be sure that you have deleted it, there's some commands. There's one called shred, and there is another one called, so a typical method that you use in maybe if you're doing something malicious or you just want to delete files in such a manner that it will be difficult for them to be recovered, is you can first maybe overwrite its contents with zeros, and then you can maybe now shred it. So what the shred command does, let me type in man shred. It overwrites a file to hide its contents. So we actually have a command to overwrite a file. So if we do not want, some experienced investigator to find it, we can just, use the shred command followed by the name of the file. And then once we have shredded it, overwritten its location with some random things, we can then proceed to delete it. That way, when the investigator comes and goes through the disk with some tools, he might be able to recover the file, yes, but then he'll only find some random things. So he will not find its contents. Now, on the defensive side, if you do not want logs to be easily deleted on a system, what you can do is use a centralized logging system. So if you're, for instance, managing a group of computers, be it in an enterprise or in a company, rather than have logs managed on each machine individually, you can install agents on each machine within the network and have them forward those logs to another central location. So that way, even if malicious actors gain access to a computer and mess up with the log files, you will still have a backup of those files in some centralized location. So I hope that clarifies your question, Charity.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other question? We're just about to actually wind up. Okay, so let's head over to the final slide, which is getting system information. So if you want to get system information, so for instance, you've connected to, maybe you've purchased these virtual private servers in the cloud, and you have connected to it, and you are within the machine, or maybe you are an attacker and you've been able to break into some network, and all you have is the command line, and you want to know you want to have some more details about the system that you are on. A popular command used for that is called the uname command, and it is short for Unix name. So by typing it in and hitting enter, by default, it will give us the name of the kernel. But if you want to see more usage instructions, just type in man for the man pages again and hit enter. And as you can see, it prints system information. By default, it prints certain system information. With no option, it will just print the kernel name, as I've mentioned. In this case, it is Linux. But if we want to get all the details of the system, we can just use the A switch, which is short for all, and it will give us all the information of the system that we are on. We can also specify the N, which is short for node name, if we want to get the host name, R to get the kernel release, that is the version of the kernel that we are using, to get the version. If you want to get things like the hardware details of the machine, the processor, and the operating system. If you want to get some help or to view the version of the command, we have the author. Interesting name, David Mackenzie. So let's quit. And I'm just going to type in uname with the A switch, which gives us everything. And let's break this down. So the first value right here is the kernel name. The second value is the host name. So this is the name that I've just, provided for my own laptop. This you can change in your settings on your system. And then next we get the kernel release details. So the first value, 5.15.0, is the kernel version number, the kernel version number. Right now, I think the latest is 6.9. Last time I checked. Let's just open the GitHub repo for that. GitHub, Torvalds, Linux. You should be able to see the latest version of the Linux kernel. Yeah, so the latest version is Linux 6.9 2 days ago. So that's the version they're currently working on. So my system is quite behind. I'm still on 5.15 kernel. And then the next value right here, 89, is what we call the patch number. So once they have released a new version, they do not just release it and forget about it. Of course, new vulnerabilities are discovered, new features are introduced, and they keep updating it. So every time they update that version of the kernel, this number gets incremented. So from the number 89, we can tell that this kernel has undergone improvements or patches or updates 89 times. And then the next value here, generic, simply indicates that we are using the standard kernel version. So if you're using a kernel from another company, for instance, Red Hat, a customized version of the Linux kernel, then you'll probably have a different name right here. The next one that we have is details of the operating system that we are using. In my case, that is Ubuntu. As you can see, the version is 20.04. And then we have some details like, I don't know if this is when it was last updated, probably. And then the next value that we have is the hardware, the machine architecture. So these are 64-bit machine. And finally, we get, I don't know what exactly this is. So let's go back to man uname to see what the last value is. So the last value, I believe, is the operating system or the hardware platform, probably. But I believe you're getting it. You're familiar with what these details represent. So that is it. That is the last command that you're going to look at today. And if there's any questions, now is the time. If there's anything that you'd like to know more about, any clarification that you would like from what we have covered today, feel free to raise up your hand and ask. Okay, 6.6.9. Pads, I don't know what you meant by that. 6.6.9, I guess you meant the version for the Linux kernel. So you've seen here it's 6.9. Can someone update the Linux version for a Metal Kali OS? Yes, you can update that, but we'll be looking at that tomorrow. Tomorrow is when we'll be looking at things like network operations, managing processes, managing different users on the operating system, downloading or installing and installing, updating, upgrading the operating system and different packages. That is what we shall be covering tomorrow. So any questions for what we've covered today? Or any comments? I'm actually done. That's it. Let me even close this. And if you want to exit the terminal, by the way, now that we are